Okay, everyone. I'm going to be showing you essentially how I'm doing the rocket animation for the real-time film that I'm working on. So essentially, the rocket animation itself is handled in a different file. So if you treat this cube as the ship, and if I add this in, the rocket animation is rendered off as a PNG sequence with an alpha background. And if this was the real time, I would have the PNG sequence uh, as a texture applied to this plane. And I essentially just parent it to the cube, and the cube is representing the ship. And as the ship sinks, uh, you know, the the rocket animation follows along. It's that way you move it around and everything is good. But let's get started. So I'm going to delete the light and the camera. I'm going to come in here and add a UV sphere. And before I do anything else, I'm going to come over here, set it to the Filthy Imperial system. Okay. And let me add this just so I can see. Okay. I want to scale this down because it needs to be a bit smaller. And now the scale is off. So I'm just going to Control A, apply the scale. And now the scale is at 1. So that's good. So on frame 1, it's already exactly where it needs to be. So I'm just going to set a rotation or a location keyframe. And then I'm going to zoom out because this thing is going to be traveling quite a distance up. And I'm using I'm using the final thing that I've already rendered off, so I know everything. But if you want your rocket to travel, this far up or further up, then you're going to have to put in those things yourself. I'm just showing you what I went with and what worked best for me. So I'm going to come over to frame 96, which is 4 seconds in, and I'm going to GZ to move it on the Z axis, and then I'm going to go upwards by 600 feet. And I'm going to have to scroll even more out. All right, so there we go. That's the starting point down here. And now this small little orange ball up here is our end point. And I also want to make it curve a little bit. I don't want it to just go straight up in the air. I want to make it curve a little. So I'm going to drag it on the y-axis over here. And that's good. That's like a small little arc, maybe a little bit more there. And now I'm going to add a location. So if I play this through, you can see the ball moving, but it kind of eases into the movement and then really gets going. And then as it approaches the end keyframe, let me set this to 96 so it just keeps looping. You can see that it starts to slow down, and rockets don't really do that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to come over here, split this, and come into the graph editor if Blender will cooperate with me. All right. So I want to work on this Z location first because this is the upward movement. If I grab this starting keyframe, you can see that thing I was describing, which is the kind of easing into it, and this straight line is it moving at like a constant rate of speed, and then it starts to slow down again. So if I grab just this handle right here on this is the keyframe itself, but it has a handle, and I GY to move it up to where it's almost straight. You can see that it starts off very quickly now. And I actually want it to go even faster. Maybe a little bit too much. Now I'm going to do the same thing, but drag this down on the y-axis. There. And you can always just do it the easy way of just selecting both of these, coming over to channel, interpolation, linear. But that's going to make it move at like a constant rate of speed. So let me move this back down a little bit. There. Okay, and then the next one that we have to worry about is the Y location. And this one is kind of arcing, so we need to do it in the opposite direction. So I'm just going to play with the handles again to try and get a feel for it. And there you go. So now I can combine this, get it out of the way for now. And this is the first half of the rocket animation. The next thing that I need to do is add in a particle system. So if I come over here to the particle tab, which is this, if you hover your mouse over it, it'll give you a little indication, or it should, it's not popping up, but now you can see there are particles coming out. And again, I'm just going to go over the settings that I used for my final render. You might want something different. You might want more sparkles coming out of the rocket. You might want less. It's all up to you. So the way that I did this, if I come all the way up to frame 96, the way that I did this is I have two separate objects. I have the rocket itself, which is expelling sparks and flame out of the back of the rocket. And then I have a separate object up here, which is the actual explosion and the mortar shell itself. So what I'm going to focus on right now is just that first bit, and I will do the mortar shell separately. But since this is going to reach this point, and then it's going to be blinked out of existence, I don't want it to continue expelling particles because it's going to look weird. So I'm going to leave the start frame at 1, but I'm going to change the ending keyframe to 96 because that's the current frame that we're on. And now if I just let this play out a little bit longer, you'll see that it stops expelling particles on frame 96, which is exactly what I want. And just to add a little bit of variety in there so that they're all not uniform, because the human eye is very good at picking up patterns and stuff like that, I'm going to add a lifetime randomness of 0.6, maybe 0.5. And that's just going to make some of the particles live longer than other particles. So now I'm good with the emission. I can deal with the cache later. Don't really need to do anything with the cache right now. Velocity, let me see if I messed with anything. I didn't. I left it at basis. The particles are so small we don't have to worry about rotation. Physics, I did not mess with anything there. And render, this is the big one. So rendering as a halo, I don't technically know what halos are. The only thing I know is when you render as a halo, you don't see anything in your viewport and in the final render. So what we actually need to do is we need to add in an object in order for the particles to render off. So I'm just going to add in another UV sphere. I'm going to move it over here to the side, press M, move it to a new collection, and I'm just going to call this Proxy. So this object is what, if I come back right here, stop it, Blender, stop it. All right, so all of these little particles right here are going to be changed from halo to object, render as object. And I don't want to show the emitter. Clicking this, if you have show emitter, when you're rendering your final animation, you're going to be able to see this ball. I don't want to be able to see the ball, so I'm just going to deselect it. But those particles are going to render. I'm just going to click the eyedropper and click the sphere that I just created. Coming back into side port view, and you can see the object right there, but now you can't see the particles, and that's because the scale is so small. So I'm just going to click on scale of 1, and now I press play, and they seem way too big. So let me just move this back down to 96 so that it's not eternally putting them out. So now it looks like the rocket is expelling, particles the size of beach balls, which is not good. So I'm just going to put that back down to 0.05 is the default setting. And if I zoom in, if I click on this, it gives you the dimensions. So this ball is about 6.5 feet. So this is roughly the size of, it's slightly taller than your average person. So if you keep that in mind, and you have your particles here, if you get both of them in the same screen at the same time, that is about the size of the particle that I am looking for, which just so happens to be the default size. So I'm not going to mess with it too much, but again, just because the human eye has a penchant for picking out, similarities with stuff, I'm just going to give it a scale randomness of nearly 1.0. I'm going to put it on 0.9. And as you can see, now you have particles that are different sized. The next thing to do is actually to set up the emission or the material for these sparks. And I'm going to have to, let me get rid of this because it's cluttering everything up. I'm going to have to go into shader view, and I'm just going to call this sparks, the material that I'm going to make, and switch over into EV view. Okay, where are my sparks? I can't see them. Oh, I don't know why, but there. Now that I can see my sparks going on. Let's do the world. And I don't have any lights in the scene, so there's no reason to do that. I'm going to come over into the world settings and just set it to black so that I can sort of see what I'm doing. Well, the animation takes place at night, and yeah, I'm trying to get as set up as I can. Let me just turn off the grid so I don't have as much clutter going on. So I want to delete the principled BDSF, and I'm going to add in an emission shader. Okay, connect that to the surface and switch over to cycles so I can see what I am actually doing, because I'm using cycles. I do not use Eevee for my renders. And now I can switch over to right there. All right, why is this not working? Maybe turn the strength up a bit. That'll help. I see what the problem is. My bad. I can delete this because the particle simulation does not need to have it. The proxy does. So I apologize. It's going to be the same thing, but here, let me just put sparks. And now if I switch over and use the world, it should be giving me, yep. So let me just let this play through again. And now we have particles that have a light on them. But we don't want white, obviously. And the thing about actual fire, if you look at real world examples, is it has a lot of different hues and shades to it. And unfortunately with this, you can only click on one color. Like if you clicked on red, all of them are going to be the same color. And that's not necessarily a good thing. So what I'm going to do to get around that is I'm just going to use a color ramp, connect that to the color, and now from the way that I'm about to set it up over here with some more nodes, essentially on this side of the color ramp, that's going to be right when the particles are being born. And down here on the other side is going to be where they are getting ready to die off and disappear. So now we can just continually add as many colors to this as we want to, but we have to tell Blender what to do with this information. So I'm going to add in a math node, plop it right there for now. And then the last one that I want to do is a particle info node, because this is actually what's telling Blender to do with the color ramp. So I'm going to take the age and plug it into the first value, and then the lifetime. And I want to do a division. So I'm going to change this to divide and then plug the value into the color ramp factor. And, you know, let me just delete this one for the sake of a demonstration here. I have this set to red and I have this one set to green. So now you can see when the particles are first being born, they are red. And the older they get, right before they start to blink out of existence, they're like a orangish yellow color, and then they die as a green particle. So we can play around with this a bit. Let me get the whole thing in the view so you can see what's going on. So the first thing I want to do is just add in a hex code, and I'm going to give the hex codes out in this video. I actually went to Google Images. I typed in fire and I put the image into Photoshop that it gave me, and I used these. So it's approximately a real world color for fire. So typically about the hottest fire that you're going to look at, it's not quite all the way white. It's still got a tinge of yellow and a little bit of orange to it. And then the death particle is going to be completely black. So just turn this all the way down, and that's black. Click on that one more time, add in a new color, and I'm just going to drag it down a little bit. And now you're going to start seeing more and more flame, like what you would think about when you're seeing a flame. So this is still going to be pretty hot. So FFD729, and I just click out. And this first hex code, I don't remember if I shared it, FFF3C6. And again, we're just going to keep doing the same thing. So give me this, move this, about right there is good. And now we've got like a middle aged lifespan for the flame. So now it's going to be very orange. So this is going to be FF4605. And we have one more left to do, and that is this one. Let me just copy it from the other Blender file, add and move this about right there, and 860111. And now we have like a dark red color, and then when they die, they are black. The last thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to change this to B-spline. And now if I zoom in, actually changing that back to ease would probably be best. Yeah, that's best. So now you can see a definite change. As the particles are being born, they are more white, and now they're transitioning into the more yellow color. And keep on scrolling down. And now they're starting to turn a reddish color, and they start turning red very, very quickly. And then when they die, they're black and they pop out of existence. So let me just select that. And that pretty much takes care of the first half of the animation. Now we have the second half of the animation. All right, so I'm just going to stop the playback. I'm going to go to the ending frame, which is frame 96. And I'm going to Shift S, cursor to selected. Let me get this out of the way again, so that way I can see what I am doing. And I'm going to add in another UV sphere right here. I'm going to scale it down to be the same size that we moved the rocket to. So remember, we changed the dimensions to 1 foot by 1 foot by 1 foot. Now the scale's off. So again, Control A, apply the scale. We're good to go. So this one is going to be our explosion, where it sends the balls outwards. I don't want to zoom out too far. So again, we're going to add a particle simulation. But as you can see, not quite what we're going for. So let's come over to the emission. I went with 20 like balls that were being emitted. And let me just move this up to 120 for now and move this start frame to 96, because this particle simulation is actually going to start on frame 96. So change the start frame to 96 and the end frame to 96. I want all of the particles to be released in one frame. I don't want it to keep releasing afterwards because it's an explosion. They all need to come out at the same time. These trail rockets were being left alive for 50 frames. I'm going to basically triple that. I'm going to make them last for 150 frames. And, you know, same thing, 0.5. I don't want all of them to blink out of existence at the same time. So let me just 240. And now they're just going to keep falling. So we have our explosion, but it's not doing a whole lot of exploding. if you catch my drift, they're basically just popping into existence and then immediately falling down. So that is where all of these velocity, physics, rotation, not so much rotation, but we have to play with stuff. And these are the settings that I found looked most like what I was going for. So I went into the velocity tab, and the default velocity is 3.28 feet per second, or 1 meter per second. And I am going to change that to 100 feet per second. And now you can see when they pop into existence, they really pop into existence. They are blowing up. All right, this is our proxy. So now I can fit the entire thing in. There we go. So you see, this is a massive, massive explosion. And you would think that that's too much, but after playing around with these other settings, it is going to dial it in a bit. And let me just check and make sure I didn't do anything else. I did. I added in a random effect of 1, just some of them pop out faster than others. Next, I'm going to go into the physics tab. Let me just open the physics tab on my other one, and this is the big one that's going to start messing with how fast not only they explode, but also if you've ever watched an actual firework, they will explode and then kind of trail a bit before they start to fall. So that's what I'm going to be working on here. And the settings that I found worked best for me were 0.59 on the Brownian. And let me just let that play through once just so you can see. So now they're taking a little while to get spread out, whereas before they were just immediately shooting out. And I'm going to increase the drag to 0.5. Let that play through once. And we've already almost halved the entire explosion. And then finally the dampening, and this is what's going to give it that little curve. So I turned this to 0.015. There. Now we have a much more realistic, instead of just popping out in 100 feet in every direction. And now you see they're also blinking out of existence at different times. I know it's very, very small, but if I zoom in a little bit more, you'll be able to see. There we go. And the same thing as before, we are going to need a proxy. I'm going to come down here. Oh, that's why I couldn't see anything. I had a wireframe view. My apologies. So I'm going to come back to frame 96 because that's the start. And I'm going to grab our original proxy down here for the rocket trail that we did the material for. And I'm just going to shift D to duplicate it, Y on the Y-axis, and I'm just going to bring it to right here. Go back into my side view, and I'm just going to come in and delete that material that we had and add another one. And I'm just going to call this explosion. Same thing as before. We are going to want to split the view. Let me get rid of all of this clutter. And shader editor. Okay. Now, where's my explosion so that we can actually see what's happening up here. There we go. There's the particles waiting to pop into existence. And just so that I can see what I'm working on, I'm going to set as render, change it from halo to object. And this is sphere 0.003. There we go. And now I can see what I am working on. So if I click on sphere 003 and switch over into rendered view, I can get the material set up. So this one is sort of similar to, well, I mean, it's basically the same thing. It's just got an extra node in it. And because of that extra node, I am going to need a mix shader added in. But apart from that, it's the same one. So let me just go ahead and get everything set back up with the emission shader. Okay. And the color ramp. Add that to the color. I need a math node. We go ahead and set this to divide, value to value, or value to factor. And finally, a particle info node. And age divided by lifetime. And the final bit is to take the division value and plug it into the factor of the mix node. And then finally add in a transparent BSDF shader. Plug that into the bottom of the mix shader. So now the only thing that we have left to do is to actually pick out the color of our rocket balls. And again, this is the beginning of their life and this is the end of their life. So right now they're being born as black, and the further you go along in the animation, the whiter they get. I wanted to make them be born pure white, so like as bright as possible. And there are conflicting accounts about, you know, which color the rockets were. A shameless admission on my part is I simply went into James Cameron's movie and I color picked this hex code from the film. So now there. They are born as this color and they keep on until they reach this color and then they die. I can leave it right there. Click on our explosion ball because we got some more settings to play with. And let me just switch back to right here. So now we have our object scale and everything to set. I'm going to close the physics property. So with object scale, I wanted the balls to be bigger than the particles for the rocket trail. So I wound up going with 0.25. I did set a scale randomness of 0.2 or 0.2 just to give them a little bit, make sure they're not all the same size. And again, in the render, I clicked on turn off show emitter. So let me just do that so that they are, let me let this play through once. Cool. And now I can come back to the 96th frame, switch over to right here. And as they are blown up, you can still see the emitter in the viewport, but in the render, it will not show up. And that is almost it. So let me get rid of this. That is pretty much exactly how I did the animation. I am going to turn these off so that I don't get to watch them in the viewport. And the final thing that I did, you will see this problem. If I come back to frame pre-96, as the rocket trail is traveling upward, this is still visible. And this is a problem. We don't want to have a light hanging in the middle of the sky while the rocket is traveling up to it before it blows up. And I was trying every which way. I was looking into green screening this out. And then I remembered that you can basically keyframe and animate almost any single value that you could ever possibly need in Blender. So again, this explosion takes place on frame 96. So, and we are on frame 93. So if I travel further up, this is when the explosion starts. Okay. If you come over to right here, let me move this up a little bit so it's more visible. Let me just add this one in. You can actually keyframe these values. So this little, it looks like a little desktop screen. If you turn this off, it disables the viewport to where you cannot see it in the viewport. So if you actually hover your mouse over this, turn it on, and click I, you can keyframe these values. The same with the little camera. And then if you go back by just one frame to frame 95, turn them off, I. And now when you render out your animation of your rocket, they do not show up. They only show up when they need to show up. So if I go back to frame 1 and do this to frame 1 and then come into my side view, make sure I get the entire animation in the viewport. There you go. And as you can see, the little sparks, let me move that cursor out of the way. The little sparks show up exactly how you would want them to. And let me turn the proxies off so you can get a good approximation of what everything is going to be looking like. And they kind of hover in midair. They kind of lose their mass. They aren't all falling at the same speed. And that is essentially how I did the rockets in the upcoming real time. So I basically pulled the camera out. I made sure to catch the entire animation in one single frame. I rendered everything out with a transparent background. And then once I had everything rendered out, I put the image sequence onto a plane and parented the plane to the ship. And that is how I did my rockets. Hope you guys enjoyed the animation and the tutorial. It was quite a bit of a long one and I messed up a little bit in the beginning, but we powered through it. So thank you for watching. If you like what I do, you want to support the channel, like, comment, subscribe. If you want to help me out even further, check out my merchandise store and consider becoming a channel member. You get access to private videos a couple of days before they're made public for everyone else, and there are some tutorials and stuff I have planned along the way that will never be released publicly. They'll only be for the members. So thank you guys again. Take care of yourselves. Be well.